We'll make a little prototype, and then the dissertation will just feature that, and it'll be a framework for other people to build in the future, build bigger and bigger versions of the same thing. It's called the evolution grid, the Evo grid, because it's a hope that evolution will emerge in this kind of simulation one day. It won't during the length of this dissertation work. So it's a hope for the future. So Origin of Life, I've been to Origin of Life conferences, and it's so tricky because most of them agree, the people who are looking at this, you can form little chemical cells, little empty vacuoles, they're called vesicles, out of fatty sort of lipids. They form all the time in ocean water and whatever. You can actually even form little copying strings of molecules, RNAs and whatnot. You can see reactions happening in cycles. That's like metabolism, that's like your digestion. But all of those have to come together in some meaningful form to make the first cell. And yet the first cell is really complex. The cells that we see, the simplest bacteria, is a gigantic, complicated machine. So how can you get the gigantic, even the precursor, the earliest bacterium, the earliest cell, was pretty complicated, had to, due to these minimum functions. So it's tough. It is really tough. To have a replicator, an information store, to have metabolism reliably cranking away in a container, those three things. And so there's various groups have actually gotten replicators to get going. There's groups that have gotten containers to get going. There's groups that have metabolism going. But how to, was it one big miraculous accidental happenstance that a cell formed with all these things just perfectly and then survived? We'll never know. But in the lab in the next 20, 30, 40 years, somebody might show what I'm calling chemical aliveness rather than biological aliveness. Chemical aliveness is stuff that's happening where the chemistry is showing little elements that are becoming species of molecules or big super macromolecules. So the biologists don't have to worry about naming them, but the chemists are going, there's natural selection happening in here. And what the strange thing is if they do this in the lab and real life emerges from a chemical soup, what do we do with that? When you pour the beaker out at the end of the day, you're wiping out a whole little primordial ecosystem. What is your responsibility? There's an ethical question. And if you never reproduce the experiment, they're lost forever. We're using, because we're using GROMACS, it's a real molecular dynamics simulator, we're using, it's built for chemists. So when we put a little soup in there, it's actually modeling hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, etc. When things start to bond and come together, it's because chemists want things to be realistic. So we're using a realistic environment that is modeled after real chemicals. So we get that for free. So we're trying to actually model what it would be like in a centimeter of water. And it's hard, but the tools are out there just now in this last few years.
Okay, and one last question is, how does your research relate to the notion of green issue and sustainability?
Well, in a sense, as humanity chugs along toward total catastrophe, as we chug along toward total catastrophe, what you've noticed in the last 50 years is total catastrophe could have happened at several points, but we've solved problems. And we're still heading towards some kind of really horrific set of problems. But we had the Green Revolution in the 70s, which led food production to go up a lot. Otherwise, we would have had mass starvation by 1980. Then we had pandemics that could have knocked out a big part of the population, like AIDS and whatnot. And so medical science went after those. Now we have this H1N1 swine flu. So we're sort of postponing the inevitable crash. But in some sense, things like the Evo grid are the tools for the mid-21st century, when we really need to know how biology works, how evolution works. For some reason, we just don't know what. But this is primary science. It's fundamental theoretical biology. It's fundamental science. But the Evo grid will provide tools for medicine, hopefully show humanity that we came from a miraculous beginning that didn't need a creator, because when you put a creator in the picture, then you have people going crazy. they go mad defending their positions because it now becomes a human issue and a personal issue, and because the creator is inevitably a figure, kind of a human figure, and humans are fallible, and it's so if we find that the Evo Grid shows that we came from an unbelievably amazing combination of things, we'll find out that we're amazing. We're very rare in the universe, and we actually ought to take care of ourselves and our planet